Hey everybody, welcome back again to the Modern Trumpeter Podcast. I first met our next guest at the Telluride Jazz Festival a number of years ago backstage. He's a great human being and an incredible musician as well. Today we get to speak with trumpet player and trombone player Dave Richards. Dave Richards received both his bachelor's in jazz arranging and his master's in jazz composition from the University of North Texas. During his time at North Texas, Dave played both trumpet and trombone in the Grammy-nominated 1 O'Clock Lap Band. Since graduating from UNT in 2009, Dave has gone on to travel the world with various big bands and touring musical theater productions of Broadway shows. He currently resides in Los Angeles, where he works as a freelance brass player, composer, arranger, and band leader. He has had the pleasure of playing or recording with such artists as California Transit Authority, Katy Perry, Gwen Stefani, Frank Stallone, Spencer Day, the Glenn Miller Orchestra, the Mike Barone Big Band, and the Tom Kubis Big Band. Many of Dave's arrangements can be heard on the University of North Texas 1 O'Clock Lab Band albums from 2005 to 2010. Dave has also been commissioned for multiple compositions and arrangements by different educational and professional bands, including the United States Air Force Airmen of Note. Most recently, he has joined the Oakland soul band Tower of Power, playing lead trumpet and trombone. And if you are new to the podcast, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Modern Trumpeter and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Modern Trumpeter. We are also in the process of writing a book called The Modern Trumpeter, A Guide to Building a Versatile and Successful Career, which will be publishing later this year in 2026. The book covers dozens of topics in regards to real-world gigs, culture, and opportunities from real-world musicians who are making a living playing the trumpet. With insights and stories from dozens of professional trumpet players, this book gives you the tools, mindset, and insider knowledge to turn your talent into a sustainable career. Insights, stories, and behind the scenes of the music industry are provided by the likes of Wayne Bergeron, Michael Sachs, Bobby Shue, Bria Skomberg, Bajan Watson, Marcus Printup, Glenn Marhevka, Dave Richards, Jay Webb, Jerry Hay, Brian McDonald, Kiku Collins, Josh Kaufman, and many, many, many more. Now, here is my interview with Dave Richards. Where are you from, when you first got into trumpet, and kind of when you knew you wanted to make trumpet a career?
Okay, so going back as far as possible, I was actually born in England, so my folks are British, which actually is relevant because growing up there, everybody took music classes up through a certain age, and whether anyone carried on with it as a career didn't really matter, but everybody at least knew how to play like piano and maybe a basic wind instrument, stuff like that. My family moved to California in 82 when I was like 10 months old, so I didn't really have much of a choice. I don't have an accent, but all that kind of stuff. I'm British on paper, but I grew up in California. So they started, both my brother and I, in music lessons when we were really young. So I started playing, everybody says they start on recorder because it's the place to start. I must have been like in kindergarten or first grade or something, but I actually took it seriously and, started getting all the different keyed recorders and playing duets with my teacher. Then when I got good enough, I was playing quartets with my teacher and some of his friends that also played, doing things like recorder sonatas with a pianist and all that stuff for, local recitals at this music school that I was going to when I was real young. They'd have a bunch of teachers of a bunch of different instruments, and then they would take all the students of similar ability levels and put them in like jazz ensembles or rock ensembles or a wind ensemble or something like that, based on what you play and how well they think you'll do with, other people's personalities as well. They were really good about finding good matches for people. And eventually, of course, my teacher said, hey, if you're going to continue with music, you should probably pick up a slightly more practical instrument. So he was he's still teaching as far as I know, mainly a woodwind teacher, but could teach beginning trumpet. And for whatever reason, I just picked trumpet, and I have no idea why, but it seemed to have worked out.
Yeah.
So eventually, of course, he's like, okay, you've progressed enough. I've taught you all I can. Let's get you to an actual brass teacher. And I've just been lucky throughout all of my music education growing up that I had teachers that were actually interested in helping me be a better player and musician, not just a trumpet player, but a better musician in general. Yeah.
That's great. And was there a point early when you were playing that you were like, yeah, I want to do this?
I don't know if I ever had that specific thought, because from a young age, I mean, obviously as a kid, you're into going out and I had friends that lived close by. So, ride my bike to my friend's house and we'd hang out and not do music, but maybe play some video games or go to the park, play some soccer or whatever. It doesn't matter. But other than that kind of stuff, the only other things I was doing was music. Like by the time I was in middle school, I was already taking 3 different sets of lessons at this place and playing in like 3 or 4 of the ensembles. So I know it was a pain for my parents because they had to drive me, all these nights a week, but we tried to schedule lessons on the same day as an ensemble so that they could drop me off, go home and take care of whatever needed to be taken care of at home and come back a few hours later and pick me up. So it's just what I always did for fun. And then also by the time I was in middle school, I had some, a couple actual paying gigs. Like I had an Easter gig at a church that I did every year for like 5 or 6 years, and it paid way more money than I'd ever thought possible at 13 years old or something. So I had that, and I had some Christmas gigs like that, and then I started getting involved in San Jose Children's Musical Theater. I lived in San Jose, California, and my brother had been in a couple of the shows there, and then we became friends with the pit conductor, and I started playing in those shows. And the pay wasn't great, but it was still 8 to 10 shows over the course of 2 weeks, and it paid like $30 a show or something. Like for kids, that's great. But also it teaches you a lot about how the inner workings of like musical theater work goes. And I've done a lot of musical theater work in my life, so it actually set me up really well for later without even knowing it.
Yeah, great. Did you go?
I did. So like I said, grew up in San Jose, went to middle school and high school, and then I did 4 years at San Jose State. And unfortunately there, I wasn't being challenged enough, I suppose is the way to say it. Marching band was a lot of fun. Concert band was great. All that stuff was cool, but I'd already been working around town for a few years. So I was like, well, just kind of blew off the general ed classes and, failed some stuff, whatever. And then a buddy of mine graduated and was like, hey, I'm going to go do my master's at North Texas. I think that would be a really great place for you because you don't seem really happy here with what you're doing. So went there and transferred, finished my undergrad in jazz arranging, and then got a master's in jazz composition, all the whole time playing trumpet and trombone and electric bass through the different ensembles that I could. Probably spent a little more time there than I needed to, but I wasn't done getting better at what I wanted to be better at. So it was all in all time well spent.
Yeah, for sure. So at that point, so you chose like jazz composition and arranging over performance or whatnot. What was the decision behind that, and what did you do with that?
So the initial decision was that, as an improviser, especially, I wasn't at the level that I was ready to tackle a performance degree. So in the early years at North Texas, everyone has to take basic arranging classes because that's part of the curriculum. And I had noodled around with arranging before I ever got there, just from playing a bunch of different instruments, kind of knew how they all worked. I've dabbled with some saxophone throughout my time in high school, played all the brass instruments that I could for whatever concert was happening. And, at a level that was not embarrassing for sure. Like it was a functional, actual playing of the instruments. But my teachers came up to me and said, hey, your stuff is it really stands out. It really caught our eye, caught our ears. If you want to continue down the arranging path, I think that would be a really great idea. So I was like, cool, I'll check it out. And then one of my favorite things musically is to be in front of my own big band, hearing my own music being played by all of my friends that also enjoy playing the music. So it was the best possible experience at North Texas because the arranging program and the lab band program were so intertwined. So I was playing in, the 1 or the 2 o'clock, and then I was also bringing charts to the 1 or the 2 o'clock or the 3 o'clock or whoever wanted to play them. And you'd always get a really great read and you'd always get a really great performance out of them. So it just really kind of nurtures that relationship between writer and player. Yeah. By the time I was in especially grad school, it was pretty obvious that I was going to be a professional musician of some sort. Moving back to California was always kind of high on the list just because it's where my family is. And I like California. I grew up here and I live in LA now, which is a little different than the Bay Area, but it's also where the kind of work that I want to do exists. Like I really enjoy playing lead trumpet in a big band. I really like the game of the precision of doing studio work of like, can you get it right the first time? Can you read it and nail it? There's a lot of that kind of stuff in and out of studio work here. Like sometimes I get called the day of, hey, are you working tonight? Somebody got sick, gigs here, starts at this time, pays this much, you're on lead, go. Like, okay, cool. And my job is then to make it sound like I've been playing in your band for years. Yeah. So I always kind of figured California. I thought I might move back to the Bay, but the music scene up there for what I want to do it's not quite what I really needed. And LA was the most logical choice for me in that regard. And because of where I went to school, there's a big connection of former graduates, alumni from North Texas, typically move to LA, New York, or stay in Dallas, or move to Chicago, somewhere where there is a big music scene. I've learned now that I've been here a while, when I first moved to town, I reached out to people I'd never met, but people that I knew through the university's connections. And now that I've been here a while, there's people that are graduating that move out here and reach out to me. And there's kind of an understanding that if you've gone through that program and made it, a substantial way through the whole system there, that you can be trusted to show up on time, play appropriately, and be cool on the gig, and have the band leader get back to you and say everything was cool.
Cool. There's that. You come through that program, you come here, and the expectations already set. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and especially here, so much of the work is word of mouth, especially when you first get here, that you have to be on top of that part of the career. Yeah.
I think that's something kids that I teach and work with, but also like anybody who's going to read is like, it's not all about who can play best double C or who, like, nobody cares if that's the best. On time.
Yeah, there's already the guys that play the best double C's, and they've been working here forever, but they've got everything else about their playing happening as well. Yeah. So I'm not going to show up as the new guy in town and be like, well, I can play that. I mean, I can't. If it's set up properly, I can occasionally get them, but I wouldn't say that I own the note. But there are guys here that absolutely own that note, and they get called because they can do that. I get called for a completely different set of reasons, which may or may not involve even playing high notes. So you got to be good at enough stuff to be versatile for whatever comes your way.
Yeah, for sure. Take us through kind of what was your career like when you moved to LA. What was your first gig, or what was your first major gig? And of course you're with Tower of Power right now and everything, but kind of what's led up to that point? What have you done in between and all that good stuff?
So my very first paying gig in town was actually a salsa gig somewhere I think it was in Lakewood. I don't remember the name of the venue, but I remember I just word of mouth got called to play second to a local guy in town. His name's Sean Billings, and he's a marvelous player, and he's one of those guys that he's got tremendous chops. So I show up to my first gig in town and I'm playing second to this guy that's just like screaming double A's and B's out of nowhere and just reading the crap out of everything. And I'm just like, that's how it is here. Maybe I don't belong here. So, there was a little bit of doubt at first, but then I come to realize that he's exceptional. Like, he's not the norm for that kind of stuff. So he and I, of course, have become good friends over the years and done a lot of work together. And it's always good to see him on a gig. So, that led to more salsa work. Friends that I was meeting in the local big band rehearsals that were happening at the Musicians Union were also playing. Some of the other younger guys were playing in some salsa bands, because the Latin bands here they're very prevalent. There's a ton of venues, there's a ton of bands, and a lot of them are real good. So I got very lucky in that one of my friends that I was playing with in big band rehearsals was in a band called Son Mayor, and for whatever reason they needed a second trumpet player, and he got me in that. And then they found out I also played trombone, and the way their book works, they can either have two trumpets and a trombone, or two trumpets, a trombone, and a bari, or two trombones. So regardless of the gig, I could be either the second trumpet or the second trombone, and they could get some reliability with the band members. And like, I was new in town, I had literally nothing else to do, and I needed the work. So I lucked into a band that was playing 3, 4, sometimes 5 nights a week. And even though those gigs aren't always the best pay, if you do enough of them, it adds up. And my overhead was low, my rent was cheap, I had very few bills, I was lucky to have no debt.
Yeah,
a few $100 a week goes a long way.
Sure.
So that's kind of, and from there you just meet, the more people you meet, the more prepared you are for each gig, the more work you just get out of it, because the best thing that we can all have is when our friends are working, because if our friends are working, they might have to sub out of something, or if they get called for something, say, hey, I can't do that, but hey, call my friend, he's new in town. And it just snowballs. And part of it is also, it's not just being good and showing up on time and all that stuff, but you have to be able to hang on the gig, but not necessarily in the way that everybody thinks. Like some people are like, oh well, I gotta if I don't drink a beer with these guys, then they're not gonna call me again, which is absolutely not true. Like, by being cool on a gig, it really means you're nice, friendly, appreciative of the work, you do a good job, and you don't cause any trouble or any problems. Like, you don't have to be the greatest at hanging out with people. You don't really even have to talk that much, but you have to be pleasant to be around. Yeah. But in our line of work, even the quiet ones, I'm not a quiet one, but like the quiet ones still tend to talk and hang out on the breaks. And, we're always interested in the work that our friends are doing. So like, someone just went on a short tour out of the country somewhere, and you just ask them questions about that. Or, hey, you just played on this TV show, or just recorded this movie. Or there's always so much different work to talk about, and everybody's doing different things. It's fun. LA is a big place, and Orange County is included in kind of the whole Southern California area, even down to San Diego and out to Santa Barbara. The working area for a musician in LA is hundreds of miles. So sometimes it's the only place we get to see our friends if they live 100-something miles from us.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I've been out there many times, mostly for vacations.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and when you move here, you just move wherever you can get that's a reasonable place. But then eventually a lot of people look for a place that is close to what they're doing. So if you're working at Disneyland, which is a great gig, by the way, you probably want to live somewhere in Anaheim, or just a little further south, or maybe Fullerton, which is right next door to Anaheim. But I live like 50 miles from Disney. So doing a regular gig at Disney, driving 100 miles a day, would kind of suck. You add traffic into that, and you're spending like an hour and a half to 2.5 hours in the car one way. You're like, this. Yeah. But I've definitely had weekends where it's an hour and 20 minutes to get to Santa Barbara, but that's like kind of northwest on like maybe a Friday night. But then I've got to be down in Carlsbad or San Diego on a Saturday night, and that's 120 miles south. So 200 miles. I live somewhere in the middle, but I'm still driving to each of those, and not as much anymore. Luckily, the bus driver does most of the driving for us.
That's nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Salt Lake is not close to.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and that's similar here. Like, the gigs where you're doing that kind of driving are generally weddings or private parties out in like the real affluent areas. So okay, yeah, I got to spend this much time, but the gig pays, like, it pays well enough to make it your whole day. Yeah, yeah, yes, yeah. I played with them for probably about 7 years. Yeah, and I mean, part of that time, of course, was when the world shut down for a little while. In 2020, 2021. Yeah, they're still going. The lineup has changed a little bit, and we used to be uh in really good standing with Disney as a contracted band. So they would hire us not as Disney employees, but we'd be contractors and get hired to play in the park for like the holiday festival or the food and wine festival. We did they have a Valentine's thing called Sweetheart Nights in Disneyland. And then if there were private parties that happened at the Grand Californian or any of the other hotels on site, a lot of times we'd end up doing those because they liked our brand. They liked how easy we were to work with and how good of a product we delivered, all while being very easy to work with. Like, we never caused any problems. We were always on time, because obviously Disney is one of those places where things run according to schedule. And if they don't, you get a talking to, and then you lose your job. So, yeah. So no, that there've been a lot of great times with that band for sure. Occasionally, maybe a couple times a year, like if they've got a wedding gig, or if there's something that either somebody got sick or last minute had to bail for something. Let's see, the best way to put this is probably there are other players in town that need that kind of work more than I do right now. Like, I understand I'm very fortunate to have the gig that I do. So if it's a decent money gig, but there's friends of mine that I know are struggling, that are great players, that are part of the, like, Fat Cat has about, at one point I think there were like 30 or 40 rotating members, and that all understood the gig. So you could kind of pick and choose, and even have like two bands running on the same night. If there was, let's say there was a gig in the park and there was a gig at one of the local downtown clubs or something, you could actually have two separate Fat Cat swingers playing at the same time. But there are definitely people in the organization, in the band, in the lineup, that need the work in town more than I do. So I always would tell the band leader, Marco, like, try the other guys first, and if I know some of them are also busy, if none of them can do it, yeah, I'd be happy to play. It's not that, I mean, I left on very good terms with them, so to speak. Like, in fact, I was on tour with Fat Cat I was scheduled to do, it was like a 6 or 7 week run, kind of on the East Coast and the Midwest. And that was right when I got the Tower gig, and obviously had to explain the whole situation. And I got nothing but respect from everybody involved. They were like, that's a great gig. That's the perfect gig for you. As long as we can tell people that you were in our band, that kind of thing. And it was very, very supportive. But I had to leave the tour after 2 weeks to go start playing with Tower. So it wasn't ideal, but, there were other guys that came in and finished out the tour, and they needed the work, and they had a great time, and they're great players. And it just goes back to the whole thing of, the best thing that we can have is all of our friends to be working. I got another gig, so I had to sub out, and somebody else got some work, and it, set them up for, 4 weeks of work. Great. you know yeah. And that's a good point of, like, the whole staying at home thing, is when, Tower's on the road for off and on 6 months out of the year. So when I am home, I have stuff I need to do at home. It's I don't want to be going out, and the kind of the premise is like, if the gig pays a whole lot and they really want me, cool. Or is it my friend that is putting on a big band gig, and it's all their music and they're running the band, but the pay is next to nothing? I'm like, absolutely, pay me nothing to play in your band. I want to play your music because it's fun, and you're my friend, and let's go make music. It's like one extreme to the other, like, pays nothing or it pays way more than it should. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's the same here. We don't have kids, but we have a dog, a nice old stinky senior dog. He's going to be 17 soon. Yeah, he's still kicking. He's in great shape. He sleeps a lot, but whatever. But also, it's also just the physical aspect of, like, living on planes and buses, and living out of hotels and suitcases, and then you get home and, like, everything's just here. Like, yeah, I only have to walk down the hall or walk downstairs to go get lunch out of my fridge, instead of having to, like, walk out of the hotel and, like, find a place to eat and then not guarantee that it's going to be good. Or yeah. Yeah. Well, first we'll start with, like, the actual act of touring, not nothing to do with playing, just the way tour life goes. We're lucky, so we get flown out to the day before our first show to, like, the major city that is closest to where we're going to start. And everyone meets there. Just, as we all trickle in, we'll meet up for dinner or, a couple drinks or hang out or whatever, just to kind of say hi and make sure everybody's feeling all right. Then if it's a long tour, we get on the bus the next day, which is a tour bus. There's 11 of us, 10 or 11 of us that ride the band bus, and there's 4 or 5 that ride the crew bus. So each bus has essentially 12 bunks. So it can be a little cramped, but generally we drive overnight. So we'll get on the bus after the show and drive to our next destination, which means people are always kind of trickling down, falling to bed, that kind of stuff. So as the night gets a little later, there's a lot more room to stretch out. But everybody's got their own designated sleeping space. There's a bathroom on the bus. There's a fridge, a freezer, a microwave, TVs. There's a couple different ice chests. We tend to keep the waters in the front and the more adult beverages in the back. And, Tower's been doing this a long time. So it's a well-oiled machine, and everybody kind of, it doesn't take long to get into the routine, but it's still taxing because you're moving almost every day. Yeah. So the driving overnight means you roll into the hotel anywhere between 3 and 8 in the morning, check into the hotel, take a nap, wake up, go find some lunch, check out, go do sound check, have some dinner, do the show, get back on the bus, do it again. So it's the travel. That's really what you're getting paid for. The show, the playing the music, that's the easy part. Because when you're playing great music with people you really like at a high level, and it's all fun and everybody's cool, that's what it's all about. But it's everything else surrounding that makes touring difficult. But also, once again, because Tower's been doing this for so long, that the pay is good. The hotels we stay in are nice. There's per diem on top of whatever the gigs pay. We have a tour manager that kind of organizes everything while we're out on the road. There's a business manager that takes care of the finances. There's a band manager that takes care of the bookings and all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. We also have a travel agent. So literally all I have to do is open this app on my phone, and it says, your flight is at this time at this airport. And then it's just got the schedule. And it's a whole year calendar and all of the information about where the gig is, what the gig is, what time dinner, where's dinner, is it a buyout, all this it's just right there. So I don't even really have to think about anything. As long as I'm, once again, getting back to how to help your career early on, as long as I'm punctual and on time, they don't need to talk to me about anything. I just show up, do my job well, and we hang out on the bus and everything's fine. So it's a very punctual band, probably the most punctual band I've ever worked with. It's the whole, if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. So early is on time is late is not acceptable. And we've left people, if they're not ready to go to the airport, they have to find their own way to the airport, because we're not going to risk most of the band missing a flight because one guy accidentally overslept. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah, you don't make that mistake more than once. And it's a certain lifestyle that I really enjoy the traveling, even though it's difficult. I like going to see new places. I like going to see old places. And I've been fortunate, in North Texas, I was in pretty good with the music education department and the music fraternity and sorority, music for fraternities there. And just when you graduate with a music ed degree, you tend to just go where the job is. If you can get a really great high school job or a really great university job somewhere, you just go where that gig is. So now I've got friends all over the country, and some of them I haven't seen in 15 years. So wherever I roll into town or I know somebody's kind of nearby, I'm like, hey, we probably can get you some comps. So then we'll meet up before or after the show, and they'll come to the show and just we'll hang for as long as we can. I'm a very social person, so I like hanging out with friends, and I'll make the time. And even if I'm tired, who cares? Doesn't matter. I'm just going to be tired because that's the way this gig is. But that's okay. But if even the people that aren't as into that kind of stuff, or the guys that have been in the band longer that don't necessarily go out and explore as much, they still really enjoy the travel aspect and seeing new people and making new friends at the shows and stuff like that. So it's cool. But from a playing standpoint, especially as a lead trumpet player, where, as we know, maintaining trumpet in general just takes time and a lot of maintenance. But maintaining consistency of lead trumpet on a gig like this, you really have to find the time in your schedule every day to have a proper warm up, do a cool down after the show, even if it means doing something on the bus, knowing your limits. Like if you do have a day off and you decide to go out and like hang out somewhere, or, we've had a couple experiences where our hotel's right next to an amusement park and I love roller coasters. So like I'll go ride roller coasters all day, but then I feel a little beat up the next day and I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have done all that. So typically, for myself, I try to get about an hour in sometime during the day, like at least 2 to 3 hours before sound check. And it's almost always just kind of calm lip flexibility stuff, because it's the exact opposite of what I do on the gig. So the easiest way to kind of reset and counteract all of like the real aggressive pointed articulation kind of stuff is to just get focused on your air, get focused on like just evenness across the horn. And when I'm warming up and practicing, I generally don't venture above a high C, maybe for more than a couple of notes over the course of an hour. But obviously on the bandstand, on this gig, I don't know how many high E's and F sharps I have to play, because all the tunes are in concert D and E, and concert D was James Brown's key, so like there's a lot of James Brown influence, of course, so a lot of the stuff is in that key, which means I have to be responsible for just picking high E's out of the air. But if I've got my air working properly, and if I'm not tense here, or if everything's working right behind the teeth, I don't need to practice the high notes. I don't need to practice the like stabbing of notes and things like that. It's being better at the trumpet and being as relaxed as possible will allow me to play the gig as I need to play it. And does it always work properly? No. There's good nights and bad nights. I'm fortunate. And, the guys tell me, like, even your bad nights are really good. So you're your own worst critic. You're doing fine, And when you do 120 shows in a year, you might not hit every single high F sharp in what is hip. It's just going to happen. It's the trumpet. It's an explosive, volatile instrument sometimes, and that's the way it goes. But the more you fixate on it, the worse it gets, because then you get frustrated and you start to tense up even more, which means it's going to work even less. So, yeah. An hour or so of lip flexibility stuff, and if I don't have that much time, I can find a way to make it work with about 30 minutes. I tend to just warm up in my hotel room, not even with a practice mute, because we're only in our hotel for a day. So if anybody complains, we're already gone by the time the complaint gets to me. But it's, at a controlled volume. I've only ever, in a year and a half in the band, I've only ever had 3 complaints. And it tends to be mostly in airport hotels, because if there's pilots trying to sleep, that's a good reason for me to not play in the hotel, So after the gig, I'll relax a bit for 10 or 15 minutes and then do like a cool down of just some arpeggios and stuff, starting like middle C and all the way down to the pedal register, and just going down by a half step, take a little time in between each one to just kind of like flap, get some blood flowing, because much like athletes, we're burning these muscles out. But how do you stretch after a good workout? By relaxing everything. Like, runners get to actually stretch their legs and do that kind of stuff, and then they'll break up all that lactic acid that builds up, which makes you feel stiff the next day. So that's how I do it. If for some reason, like, my bottom teeth aren't perfectly straight, so sometimes if I'm playing real hard, or like we have 3 or 4 nights in a row that are real like tough sets, sometimes I get a little cut and it'll eventually callus over if we're doing enough playing. But if it's real bad, I always travel with little vitamin E capsules, so I can break one of those open, just take the gel and just rub it on the cut, and it helps to kind of heal it and just make it a little bit make it feel a little fresher the next day. Yeah, vitamin E. Yeah. You know how like Neosporin is used on cuts? You put it on there and it kind of just helps the healing process. It's kind of like that, but just, I think, the most basic form of it. I don't know the exact science behind it, but yeah. And I'm not the only one that like, there was an old college buddy of mine, Jason Levi, who's a very prominent trumpet player in Vegas. I think he turned me on to that. Just like, yeah, if you've got a little thing, just a little bit, right before you go to bed. Don't go out in the sunshine with it though. It's like the opposite of sunscreen. It amplifies the burning effects. It doesn't, I don't have to do that a lot. It's probably, about once a month I might find myself doing that, but yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I've been lucky. We last year we spent a couple weeks in Japan in August, which I love Japan. It was my third time going. Luckily, whenever I've gone, it's always been for at least 2 to 3 weeks, up to five on some occasions. So like you kind of get to move into your hotel and use that as home base, and when you have time off, you go explore. And transportation is so easy there that there's just so much cool stuff to see and do. And even if you can't read any of the signs, especially in the subway stations, there's always people, whether they can speak English or not, there's always people that are willing to help you. If you can figure out a way to communicate, it's a very friendly society like that. The food is amazing, obviously the sushi, but also the fried chicken. Yeah. Oh yeah. And the ramen, of course. But even like local things that are, they're very still a localized kind of society where there's certain things you can only get in this part of the country or this part of the prefecture or this part of town, or like, so you travel across town to go the one thing that you can't find anywhere else. And it's like, okay, cool. Like it makes an adventure out of it, which is always cool. We also spent 3 weeks in Europe in November. So I got to go to some places I'd never been before, like Sweden, Norway. Where else did we go? We definitely went to Switzerland, Germany. But yeah, it's just, we don't get to spend a lot of time in all these places, but it's still really cool to just kind of like throw yourself into another culture and just figure it out. There's a lot of history in Europe, a lot of history in Japan. So like if you're into that kind of stuff, like we showed up and we were lucky we had 2 days off in Stockholm at the top of the tour, and because we had to wait for all the gear to arrive. Yeah. So, and it was still almost late, and it was yeah, like we didn't have like two of the saxophones, my trombone, and a couple other instruments made it after sound check, but before downbeat. Yeah, it was. I mean, we had backup plans, but it was like, huh, okay, that was close. But there's this museum in Stockholm called the Vasa Museum. It's VASA. Basically, it was this old like battleship that sunk 15 minutes into its maiden voyage in the Stockholm harbor. And because of the properties of the water there and of the silt and everything, it's been almost perfectly preserved. And they finally brought it up out of the depths in the 1960s and built this museum around it, and it's just absolutely fascinating. So going to see some stuff like that you literally won't see anywhere else in the world, and it's just like, cool, I'm being paid to be here. All I got to do is play music. Cool.
Seeing all these places.
Yeah, not all days are like that. One of the amusement parks was in a subsequent town in Sweden, and it was Halloween, so like everybody was dressed up, and I'm like just wandering around by myself, going on roller coasters, like don't understand what anybody's saying, but we're all there to have fun, so who cares? Yeah. Let's see. For me personally, so I've been doubling on different instruments for a lot of my life, and I think it took me longer than it should have for me to realize that that's not normal. So sometimes my interactions with my fellow musicians were probably, I don't know if I necessarily meant it to sound this way, but I probably came off as sounding cocky or better than them, even though I never thought I was, because I just assumed that everybody played more than one thing. Because my brother also played piano and did some trombone when he was younger. So like in our family, that was normal. My parents have a piano in their house, and if she wanted to, she could still sit down and kind of sight read basic 4-part stuff on piano if she wanted to. My dad used to play guitar and percussion, and they both sang in choirs when they were growing up. So multi-instrumental capabilities, it wasn't unusual to us in our family. So I've learned that there's a lot of people at a lot of different levels, and everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. I know I've got my weaknesses as well. Luckily, a lot of those don't come up in the gigs that I have, because I'm also at a point where I know when to say that's not the gig for me. You should call this person. Especially if it's like a church gig with a lot of brass quintet stuff or different key to trumpets. Like I've got a C trumpet and I can play it and it's fine. But when you start getting into like D and E flat and stuff like that, like I'm not your guy. It's okay. Like, trust me, you don't want me to play your gig. You want this guy because he's going to sound better. As far as other As far as other things that I wish I knew. When I was younger, I was focusing too much on high notes instead of being better at the trumpet. I was lucky that I was already pretty good at the trumpet, but it took me till I got to North Texas to realize that I was nowhere near as good as I thought I was. And it's humbling and it's hard to admit that, but the sooner you do that, the better you get, because then people want to hang out and play music with you, and you can find this Bugs Bauer Bach duet. So if you're hanging with, let's say, me as a commercial or jazz player who's hanging out with a classical player, we'll play some Bach duets, and we can bounce it. They can bounce ideas off of me, and then if we do some classical stuff, I can learn something from them, because it's a lifelong endeavor, and you're never going to achieve perfection, but you can have a lot of fun getting as close as possible. We all have stuff to learn from each other, and though we'll never achieve perfection, it's not about achieving it. It's about the journey and who you get to make music with, and who it's in a career where you can develop lifelong friends, even if you only see them at work. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you have any other questions that you think about, feel free to email me some stuff. If there was something, I really meant to ask that, while I'm at home, luckily my time is my own. I'm, not taking as many gigs at home as I used to, but, so today we leave again on Thursday. So today is laundry day, so I can pack tomorrow. So just take it super slow and easy, and just kind of hang out and be at home, be available. All right. Well, sounds good. See ya.
Once again, thank you to Dave Richards for taking some time with us to share more about his career and journey with the trumpet. Our next guest will be Josh Kaufman from the Army Blues, and his interview will drop in 2 weeks. Once again, this is the Modern Trumpeter Podcast, and we will see you next time.